I teach a class or two here at Stanford in the engineering department. And every once in a while I like to ask my students, does anybody know the genesis of Silicon Valley? Where did it come from? Who started it? Now, how many of you are Stanford students or Stanford alum? Right? The masters of the universe, right? The most brilliant students anywhere on the planet, so they tell you. And so when I ask them, where does it come from? My students who are sitting in the engineering building say, well, Steve, it all started with the internet. And I go, the internet? Well, who was like the founder of the, oh, Mark Andreessen. And I go, Mark Andreessen started Silicon Valley? Well, yeah, I don't know. And he's some old guy. I go, old guy, all right. Well, can you think harder? Where did Silicon Valley really come from? Oh, yeah. The guy who runs Apple. Doesn't he have grandkids or something? The personal computers. Isn't Steve Jobs the founder of Silicon Valley? I go, no. What's inside the computers? And they go, oh, we get it. Integrated circuits. And there's some buildings at Stanford named after these people. And they go, oh, yeah, Noyce and Moore. That's the beginning of Silicon Valley. And if you kind of listen to the conventional history of the valley, it was fruit orchards, Hewlett and Packard, and then integrated circuits started, and we had, PCs in the internet. What I'm going to do today is tell you that conventional history of that little garage that HP, puts in $1 billion of ads and they hire entire PR agencies to tell you is the center of the universe, actually has very little to do with the history of entrepreneurship, the history of the valley, past, present, and where it's going. And so I'm going to give you kind of an unconventional view of the real story of Silicon Valley, which started about 101 years ago, right here at Stanford, with the first spin-off called Paulson Electronics in 1910. Moved into test instruments, microwaves and defense, integrated circuits, personal computers, and the internet. And the story today is going to focus on the microwave defense section and how a single professor at Stanford helped kickstart entrepreneurship here in Silicon Valley and actually set its trajectory for today. We'll talk a bit about where it might be going. And so just some history. I'm going to tell this in 8 hopefully short stories. And the word 8 and short usually doesn't go together, but I'll try. And believe it or not, to tell the Silicon Valley entrepreneurship story, you have to start with World War II, the first electronic war. Now, I don't know if there's anybody in this room as old as I am, but when I was a kid, I used to watch World War II movies on TV. Anybody ever see World War II movies? Some of you. That was the war that about 3 or 4 would go. It was a big war. Maybe your great-grandparents. It was the one after the Civil War. But in World War II, every World War II movie you ever saw had airplanes and bombers. Anybody ever see those? And 12 o'clock high, etc. But I never thought of World War II as an electronic war. So by this title, World War II, the first electronic war, this is where some of you ought to be going, say what? And here's the story. And trust me, after about 15 minutes, it will actually connect back up to Silicon Valley, but you're going to have to bear with me. Just for you, those of you who are engineering students who didn't take any history, a little reminder, December 7th, 1941, America enters World War II. The British were fighting since September 39 by themselves. The Soviets were fighting massive land battles with their previous allies, the Germans, in the Eastern Front since June 1941. And the Allies, the British and the Americans on the Western Front, are incapable of engaging the Germans on continental Europe for at least 2 more years, if not more. And so the land war is left essentially to the Soviets. But the British and Americans and the Soviets decide that the priority after December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese entered World War II, was to win the war in Europe first, over the Pacific, and for the Americans and the British to destroy the German warfighting capacity by air. We were going to destroy Germany by air, and the Strategic Command told the U.S. and British Air Forces that that's what they're going to do. Your primary objective will be the progressive destruction and dislocation of the German military, industrial, and economic system. Whoa. And the undermining of the morale of the German people to a point where their capacity for armed resistance is totally weakened. All-out air war. And the Americans and British came up with something called the combined bomber offensive. The British were going to bomb Germany by night. They tried it during the day and had horrific losses. And they said their job was to destroy German cities, a city at a time. They didn't have the accuracy to destroy industrial targets at night. They were going to take out cities. The Americans said, hey, we have this Norden bomb site. We could put a bomb right through the chimney of an industrial site. By the way, as they found out after World War II, that 90% of all American bombs fell over 5 miles away from any target. Killed a lot of cows, but it sounded good in the press releases. See latest war, all right? But the strategic bombing of Germany was a massive industrial and military campaign. Just to give you a scale, at any one time, there were 28,000 combat planes just on the Western Front alone. Just to give you scale, there's maybe 10 or 15,000 jet planes in the entire world today. There were 28,000 active combat planes in Britain attacking Germany. 40,000 planes were lost just on the Western Front alone. About half American, half British, and throw in the Soviets, who lost another 46,000 planes. If you were a crewman on one of these planes over occupied Germany, it was more dangerous than being a GI on Iwo Jima or Guadalcanal. 160,000 airmen died over occupied Europe trying to bomb Germany. This is just the scale of what we do. And these planes took over. Can we have some audio? I don't know if we can see this. Can we turn down some lights? No? Well, I'm going to have to tell you. Can anybody see this? Yep, it's okay. These bombers took off from bases in Europe, formed up, and attacked in formation of hundreds or at times 1,000 bomber raids over Germany. Hundreds, if not thousands, of planes to attack a single target. And when they took off over Germany, over Britain, they thought they were unseen and undetected. And unbeknownst to them, the Germans had built an entire electronic air defense system. World War II, an entire radar-based electronic network. And its job was to detect, target and aim, and destroy the American and British bombers, hopefully before they got to the targets, and if not after. And the way they did it was on a scale that matched the Americans and British bomber fleet. I'm going to give you a sense of the scale. They had early warning radars, 150 of these, which were up towers 190 feet tall. Imagine something the height of a 20-story building. These were early warning radars that could see all the way over the English Channel. They had other early warning radars that actually rotated, just like the modern radars you would see today, 80 of those. So as these bombers were taking off from Britain to attack Germany, they had already been seen and detected, and there were 1,000 short-range radars. 1,000 of these deployed all across France and Germany. And all this radar data was filtered into an air traffic control system that was not designed to land the plane safely. This air traffic control system was a battle management system, and its goal was to tell the German fighter planes where to find the bombers. And there was a room about this size, kind of banked like a movie theater, with a movie screen in front. And the air battle of where the bombers were and where the German fighter planes were constantly updated. There were operators with headsets, and they would talk the German fighter plane to the location of the British or American bomber stream. So as American and British bombers are flying to their targets in Germany, they had to pass by German fighters, excuse me, German guns trying to shoot them out of the air. Looked kind of like this. So here's a bomber stream coming by.
Navigator, do you estimate we've crossed the enemy coast? Yes, sir. We sure have.
Now I want to show you this clip, because see those little black dots? Those aren't clouds. Those are anti-aircraft shells. Guns that have fired big projectiles into the air, hopefully at the same altitude of the plane, to blow them out of the air. That was called anti-aircraft fire. Now, if you've ever seen a World War II movie, you might have seen pictures of guns firing up in the air. The Germans had 15,000 of those guns, but what they never showed you pictures of is every one of those was directed by radar. There was a radar dish next to every German anti-aircraft gun. There were 5,000 of those deployed in occupied Europe. Now, the reason we kind of knew about this is one day somebody took an aerial reconnaissance photo of the coast of France. And they said, hey, that's a nice little building. Maybe after the war we could stay there. It looks like a good hotel. Hey, look at that. And someone said, what's this thing? What is this little thing? It's too big for an umbrella. What the heck is it? And it turned out it was a Würzburg radar that controlled these anti-aircraft guns. We had never seen this before. The British sent out a commando raid at night to steal it. And they stole the entire German radar, captured all the electronics, and as a bonus, got the technicians with it. They said, oh, Britain would really like to see that. Okay, come on with us. And so they stole this radar, and we could figure out how it worked and how to design countermeasures to disrupt it. And I'll tell you what we did in a second. But these radars not only controlled the anti-aircraft guns, they also controlled the fighter planes, the German fighter planes that were trying to shoot down the bombers. 1,500 of these big versions to do that. Now, if you remember, I'm just using a lot of numbers, 5,000 of these, 1,000 of these, 1,500 of these. German industry had full-time factories producing radar in World War II. Now, if you've ever seen any World War II movies, you've never seen one of these. Except one movie. Anybody ever seen Saving Private Ryan? There's one scene where they actually are attacking a free radar site. The only realistic World War II movie I've ever seen. Go look at the movie again, see if you can find it. Extra credit for the cause. The other thing that I had never seen is that when the British were bombing at night, you would kind of say, well, wait a minute. Even though if the German fighter planes got kind of directed to them at night, how would they know unless they hit them if it was cloudy where the plane was? Well, it turns out every German night fighter had these things on their front, which were the first air-to-air radars ever deployed in the middle of 1943. All German night fighters had onboard radar. Now, if you were, can you turn up the audio, please? If you were an American bomber flying across Germany, you were under constant attack. You see that? Is there anything on the screen? All you had were guns on your plane to defend from these fighter attacks.